So the name of this video I've entitled, So You Want to Sell MF Books? Here's what you need to know. So ever since I've put out maybe 2 or 3 videos when I was doing an MF operation, I'm not currently right now, but when I was, I've noticed there have been a lot of people that have been expressing interest, possibly starting their own merchant fulfill business, or taking their existing FBA business and growing it into something that is where they will merchant fulfill their books to make the extra profit on the books you normally can't FBA. So I'm just going to go over a bunch of things that I've learned when I was selling merchant fulfilled books. I was selling anywhere between 400 to 450 or so towards the peak. I could have taken that to a much higher level, but for reasons I'll discuss later in this video, I decided not to continue with it. And it was mainly due to the amount of hours, the stress, but mainly the hours. I was working crazy hours. Okay, so the very first point I'm going to make is to forget paying anything over 5 cents or so per pound for your books. So there was a time when companies would pay 10 cents to 12 cents per pound even for books. I'm not saying that it's not possible, but I am saying you're going to have a really difficult time trying to make money merchant fulfilling books if you're paying anything over 5 cents a pound. If the supplier won't budge on the price and they are just dead set on charging, whatever the rate is, I would move on. Or I would focus on FBA or something like that, but don't start something with a bad foundation. And the prices I've seen on a lot of places, especially like Facebook posts, emails I get, they always seem to be towards the absurd range, and I'm talking $200 a Gaylord or more, which as we go through this you're going to see is completely unreasonable. You won't make any money on that. You will bankrupt yourself before you even begin. So that's the first point I want to make. The second point I want to make is that one does not simply merchant fulfill books. Okay, I felt the Lord of the Rings meme here actually made a lot of sense. So I hear a lot of people and they say, I'm going to merchant fulfill books, or I want to merchant fulfill books, or I'm going to start merchant fulfilling books. And then when pressed upon what their game plan is and what they plan to do or how they plan to start it, there's so many holes and misconceptions that they're getting into something that they don't even realize what they're getting into. So the first point is a good credit score is not something that's going to be absolutely necessary, but if you don't have decent credit, you're going to need at least $10,000, $15,000 saved up to start this the right way. You're also going to need steady source of books at the right price. So again, forget anything too expensive. You're going to need a warehouse that makes sense for merchant fulfilling, and I'll get into what makes sense later on in the video. And you're going to need a competent partner or employee. So you don't need a partner, but you are going to need other people to help you out with this. This isn't a one-man show. This is not FBA books where you can do it with 1 or 2 people and then you have a team working at Amazon fulfilling orders 24/7. This is something that runs 7 days a week. So family members would actually work well, believe it or not, because they'll have a lot more vested in the business, whereas employees sometimes not so much. You're going to need plenty of shelving because you're going to come to find out that it doesn't matter how many books you have. If you have nowhere to store them, you're not making any money. So you're going to need plenty of shelving. There's all different types of shelving that you can buy. There's shelving you can make. And then the understanding that you could need to work up to 60 hours per week with very little return in the beginning phases. You could actually lose money in the beginning until you start to really get to the point where you're making money and it makes sense as a business model. So you need to be prepared for that. So for warehouse space, I have two really simple images. So one on the left with an X. So this is very low ceilings. It's very small. The shape of it is off. There's no dock. It's just terrible. And I see a lot of people talking about starting MF businesses in this kind of space. The second space is wide open. This is a space that has a loading dock and it has relatively high ceilings. I would like to see them even higher than that, but you could certainly make do with that. So for warehouse space, the bigger the better. I would say 60,000 square feet is kind of the top end for someone new, and that's going to cost you quite a bit of money. The cheaper the better as far as how much you're paying per square foot. I've seen as cheap as $2.50 per square foot triple net. Triple net is like taxes and stuff they add on for things like maintenance. More common is more like $4 a square foot and up, but it really depends on where you're located. So you're going to want to check sites like LoopNet and check your area and see what's even available, because if you find nothing at $4 a square foot or under in your area, like absolutely nothing, and everything's insanely priced, then you're going to have a really hard time making money with this. Tall ceilings is really big. The reason for that is you can store more books. You could have 2 levels. You could have one with a mezzanine, or you could just have really tall library shelving that goes really high. There's different ways of doing it. Other than that, you can stack gaylords. The higher your ceilings, the more gaylords you can stack. Loading docks are not optional. The warehouse space that I had gotten, I got for very cheap. It was ridiculously cheap, but there were downsides to that. I didn't have heat. It was eventually added, but to begin, I didn't have it. I didn't have bathrooms either, and there was no dock. So I took a lot of sacrifice for that price savings. Now I was able to make use of it without a loading dock because I had another way to get the gaylords in. You can use a forklift. There are things you can do, but the amount of hassle is really a pain. It's something that I regret. So loading docks, if I were to do it all over again, I would say loading docks are not optional. No less than 12 to 15,000 square feet, I would say, for someone that's starting out. And you're going to need to expect to move from that space within a year. And the next thing I said is you don't want to sign any long leases. So the longer the lease you sign, you're on the hook for that money. If you sign a 3-year lease and you're in a 10,000 square foot space and you get a call from your supplier and they want to give you 3 times the books and you have nowhere to store those books or to store more shelving, what are you going to do? So you don't want to sign any long leases really ever if you can avoid it. I know that's a lot easier said than done. If you don't have a contract from your suppliers as far as where you're getting the books from, then you would be really foolish to sign anything longer than I would try not to sign anything longer than 6 months for a lease for a warehouse. So month to month is ideal if you don't have any written contracts from your suppliers. Maybe 1 year would be kind of max there. Again, it's easier said than done, but this is possible. Real estate agents and people like that will try to tell you it can't be done. It can be done. It all depends on how motivated the person trying to lease that space is. For requirements, I put heat. You definitely need heat. Electric. We obviously need electric for your internet. For all your devices. You need bathrooms because you're going to have employees. Okay, I didn't have bathrooms and I didn't care. I would go across the street, but employees are not so forgiving in that way, especially when they're low income employees. You got to have bathrooms. Docks. Ideally, you'd have 2 or more docks, but you need at least one, right? You need one. Ideally, you have one for incoming and one for outgoing when you recycle. It'd be nice to have a dock for that, things like that. But You definitely want one, and high ceilings are definitely preferred. So for shelving, there's all kinds of options for shelving. Um, and of course, no surprise, all of them cost money. Library shelving is going to cost $60 to $100 per double-sided section, and they hold roughly 500 to 600 books per section. They are about 3 feet wide. You can build your own if you want. I have a picture here. This is kind of a interesting concept. This is actually cinder blocks and wood. And you can build it that way. You can build it with just wood. There's a lot of ways to do it. But, that's tough too, because sometimes after the cost of all those materials, you would have been better off just buying the library shelving. And that's what I found in my situation. Always check Craigslist for things like this. Check out of state. I would check, I'm in Connecticut, and I would check, all different types of different states around me. Ended up finding a good deal from someone messaged me actually, and found a really good deal on shelving. I got it at like something ridiculous, like 42 or something, $42 per section. But I had to buy a lot of it. I mean, it was almost $10,000 up front. So you can always get deals when you buy a lot at once. To hit the minimum of that, another misconception is how many books you have to sell for shipping discount. You need to be shipping at least 3 times a week. You ship any less than that, you're going to have problems. Amazon even started this whole thing, I think it was beginning of September now, where you have to, you can't pick the up to 14 days for delivery anymore. I believe it's like 8 days or something is the max now. So that just makes it even more important. You have to ship as often as you can. It's about 150, right? You need to sell at least 150 books a day. You could sell less than that technically because it's 7 days in a week. You include the weekends. But you want to sell at least 150 a day for the discounts. And you need to have at least 20,000 books listed. That's to be safe. That's about 36 sections of library shelving. And this isn't going to make you hardly any money. And that's just because your expenses are going to be high from everything else. So that's really just to start. You really want enough for at least 50,000 books. And again, that's really nothing. But at least it'll get you started. So that's like 80 to 90 sections. That'll cost you about 5,000. Again, if you can find them for like 60 a section, that's a really good deal. There's all different types of things you can do for shelving. Processing equipment. So you are able to process books, sell merchant fulfilled, and do it without a dumper and do it without a conveyor. I did it. I regret it. I would not do it again. The efficiency is not where it needs to be. But the bigger reason I wouldn't do it again is because we're talking low wage employees getting in and out of Gaylords. Even if they don't get inside the Gaylord, they have to tip it over. There's all kinds of things in them. It's very physical. It's very laborious. You just increase the chance for workers' comp claims, which, by the way, you're going to have. So again, this is a real business. You're going to have all kinds of expenses that you probably didn't have to worry about doing other types of things, maybe on your own or, 1 or 2 people. It's a whole different deal where, even if you pay someone $11 an hour, let's say, you're really paying them like $13.50, right? By the time you factor in all the expenses. So conveyor and Gaylord dumper, these are not optional as far as I'm concerned. If you don't have these 2 things, you're not really doing it the way that you should be doing it. You're going to be looking at about $2,500 to $5,000 for a decent Gaylord tipper. There's all different types of brands you can get. I personally like the Vestil. That's Vestil. They have a really good dumper. And conveyors, you can get those all different types of places. You can get them brand new for about $2,000. There's a really good one I found on eBay. You can get even cheaper ones. You can get a conveyor for like $700 on Craigslist. How good is it going to work? I mean, that depends. But I put these specific pictures for a reason. You can see that this has a belt. Let me just go back here. This has a belt, so it's not like there's conveyors that have, they look like rolling pins almost, where there's no belt on it. Obviously, you can't use that. The books will get stuck in it. So these are pretty good picture representations of what you want for a tipper and a conveyor. So hiring employees. So managing low pay grade employees, it can be difficult depending on what your experience is in the past with dealing with that. Merchant fulfilling, it's a low margin, high volume business. So the less books you sell, the more chance you have of just breaking even or even losing money. And hiring the wrong employees can shut down your business completely. One of my biggest pet peeves was when an employee would send the wrong book to a customer, because me and my wife, we would always be shipping books. We would go in on weekends just to lessen the load for Monday. And we would never, ever, I mean, literally never send out the wrong book, because it's a very simple check. There was a packing slip that went with every single book, and then there's a ticket that went in that book. So it was a very refined process. If you're sending the wrong book to a customer, it's because you're not paying attention. And so this will happen, and you need to know, what's acceptable, what's not. If someone picks the wrong book off the shelf and they send it, it can also cause a double sale, because the book that they're sending is the wrong book, and the right book's still sitting on your shelf, which means, this can cause issues. It can cause double sales, and it could turn your low margins, and it could turn them into losses. The next thing is, you can't afford to be too lenient with employees. If you don't follow through, other employees will see it as a sign of weakness. The mistakes will continue to be made, and then on a larger scale till you have an epidemic. It never got to this point with me. I think at the worst, someone might send out one or two, maybe even two wrong books in a day. So there's 400 orders and they sent two wrong books. Even that I consider unacceptable. I really do. Some people disagree there, but, I'm pretty firm on that. So there really needs to be strict rules and guidelines that are clear. If these are broken, then these should lead to immediate termination depending on what the offense was. It can be considered cold, but, you will lose so much money if you don't stay on top of things like this. Because what you're going to find with, hiring employees is you're going to have different types of people. Some people are just going to come in for the paycheck. They work their hours. And some people, just don't really care. They're getting paid. They do their job. They leave. This is your business. You care about this on a much different level than an employee does. So it's a balancing act that you have to be aware of. So for numbers, let's get into some actual numbers on what an operation might look like. So I would buy books for 5 cents a pound. Towards the end, I was getting around 220 listings on average per Gaylord. I would sell around 50% of those listings in a 3-month period, with an average return of $2 per book after shipping costs. So I would get $2 after all the shipping, after all that. That's averaged. So all we look at when you're merchant fulfilling books is averages across the board. That's really all we care about, because that's all that makes sense to look at as far as, managing your numbers. So that's about $220 per Gaylord. So if you're paying 5 cents a pound, let's say it's 1,000 pound Gaylord, which is kind of on the high end, that's $50, and you can get 200. I was getting $220 out of that Gaylord, which sounds really good, but when you start looking at the expenses, it's really not as good as it sounds. And that can really affect what you make at the end of the day. So we're going to get into some of those examples here. So $220 per Gaylord plus whatever you make from recycling the remainder. So it's actually more. We got 4.5 cents a pound for our recycled waste paper, which is on the high end. But I don't add this in because it's a relatively small amount compared to what you can make from selling it. And you want the pulp money to be a bonus. Like, you don't want the recycle money you get from the books to be part of the game plan, because if you're relying on that recycle money just to make any money at all, then that's not what you want. You don't want to be relying on that. You want that to be extra, so that can cover things like materials and poly bags and stuff like that. So your numbers could be a lot different than these depending on wherever you're getting books from. So this is just what I was dealing with. So you have to know your numbers. So typical expenses. So you have to have a software when you merchant fulfill books, because there's so many things to keep track of. And there's more marketplaces than just Amazon. So if you want to sell on multiple marketplaces, your software has to support that. Needlescan is one of the bigger ones. You really can't do this without a software that has the functionality that Needlescan already has in it. All of the really big mega sellers, people that are really selling a lot of books, 5,000 or more per day, they have their own software, with the exception of maybe one or two of them might still be using something like Needlescan. But these guys have their own software because the more books you sell, the more complicated you need the software to be. So that's an option, but you have to remember that's custom software. How are you going to do that? You're going to have to hire a developer, right? That's going to cost money, and you're going to spend a lot of money to get a software built, and then you have to maintain it. So any changes on the marketplace's end, you're going to have to keep that developer on call or on some type of payroll. The best choice right now for a new seller is probably going to be Needlescan. They charge you a percentage of gross sales. So I pay between $800 and $1,000 a month just for the software. And that goes up or down depending on your volume. That might sound like a lot because it is kind of a lot. But even though it is kind of a lot, you have to also keep in the back of your head that they also have a support team they're paying. So if you have any issues, you can call their support team. They've been pretty good with me about the adding in features that I wanted them to add in. So that was really good. So when you compare it to hiring your own developer, you can kind of see where it makes sense. But look, it's a lot of money. $1,000 a month for software, no matter how you slice it, that's still a lot of money, and you have to keep that in mind. Shipping software, so the actual software to ship the books, when you weigh them and you pack them and send it out, that's totally separate from Needlescan. There's a lot of different ones. They integrate with Needlescan. Unless you use a private shipping service, there's a lot of different ones, but, unless you use something other than USPS, you're going to be paying higher fees with these places. So I had 2 shipping stations going, and the normal cost was $450 a month for 2 shipping stations. Warehouse space is another typical expense. It fluctuates on how much space you have. And obviously, the more warehouse space you have, the more books you can process, the more money you can make. Also, the cost is going to be higher. So average price where I am was like $4 a square foot triple net. So triple net adds on more, right? So if it's $4 triple net, it's really like $5 a square foot or $5.50. So I think I end up being right around $3.90 triple net included, which is not terrible. But I've seen places go as low as like $2.50 triple net included. Like, I've seen some crazy deals for warehouse space. So again, you want to check that. So let's say you have 20,000 square feet. That's a pretty decent sized space. You could fit a lot of shelving. You could probably fit 150,000 books in that space. It would be a little tight. You'd have to have, it would be a little tight, but you could probably fit that many books, maybe even more. That's going to cost you like $6,600 or so per month just for the warehouse space. That's if you're paying $4 a square foot. Electric. So I paid about $300 a month for a 6,000 square foot space, which is kind of high. So you can call your electric company and get someone to come down and do like a consultation, and they can check the efficiency of the lights, The lights were not very efficient where I was, so they can come and like change those out. It's in your landlord's best interest, by the way, for them to do that. So it's something you're gonna want to talk to your landlord about. If your electric is too high, look into that. So electric, let's say you have a 20,000 square foot space. I mean, you're probably gonna pay at least 800, for that much space, per month. Maybe 750 or so if it's super energy efficient, but it's still pricey. Labor, so in an actual mega seller type operation, you really need at least 4 people sorting on the conveyor. So a typical process would be, so you could picture this, how this might look is you have the Gaylord tipper at one end, the tipper goes up, it dumps the books onto the conveyor, then you can have 2 people on one side, 2 people on another. You can use phones or you can use laptops. You can use like portable stations. There's all different types of ways you can do this. And when you're doing the sorting on the conveyor, you're just sorting. You're not listing. You're not doing anything like that. You're just taking the crap, putting it in Gaylords to recycle it, taking the books that come up accept, and you set all that stuff in your listing software like a needle scan or whatever, and you could sort your FBAs as well if you have books that are going to FBA. So for the conveyor, that's kind of how it would work. You have 4 people, they're sorting, they're putting those books onto carts is preferred, or Gaylords. You could put them in the Gaylords if you want to, but I like the idea of putting them onto carts, and then those people could wheel the carts over to someone that lists, and then every book that they scan is an accept. They're listing. There's no diving into Gaylords. There's no doing things like that. So that's kind of a typical setup that you could implement. Again, there's so many ways to do this. I'm just giving you some options. Now I'll kind of go back to what we were talking about here. So the labor, right? So now I've kind of given you the picture of the pre-sorting process. That's just one phase. That's when the books first come in. But once they are sorted, then you have to list them. So you could, for instance, if all your books come in on Monday, you could sort them all Monday and Tuesday, or even Monday. With a setup like that, you could sort a lot of books really quickly. So you could even, 30 Gaylords, you could probably do that in a day. It really depends though, but let's say 2 days. So first 2 days you could sort, and then on the 3rd day you could list, on the 4th day you could list, then the 5th day, who knows, all different types of ways you could do it. So you could use those same 4 people in the middle of the week to list. So that's kind of what I'm going with here for labor. So let's say you have 4 people sorting on the conveyor. But then I'm going to say 1 to 2 shippers on top of those 4 people, because you got the people sorting and then they list, but you need people shipping completely separate from everything else. And those people, either they work 7 days a week or they work 5 days a week, and Monday is going to be kind of a hellish day because you have all those orders from over the weekend. So you kind of have people moving around. Cross-training is really ideal. Again, I've come in on the weekend many times to ship books. So that's 6 employees. That's kind of typical. If you really want to do this right, you're looking at least 6 employees, and then you managing the place, and you can kind of step in wherever something's needed if someone calls out, things like that. So if you pay someone $11 an hour, and let's say you work a 30-hour work week, that's about $330, but you're going to be paying about 17% in taxes. That's including workers' comp, because you have to have that. You can forget about the whole thing with the 1099 subcontractors, things like that. As soon as someone's working in your space, it's 6-hour day, anything like that, they're using your equipment, the state will come down on you really hard. So that's going to be about $400 a week per employee. So that's $2,400 a week in labor for employees alone. Your cost of goods. So let's say you get 30 Gaylords a week. Let's say you pay 5 cents a pound, average weight 900 pounds of Gaylord. That's $1,350 a week. So what's that per month? $5,400, right? Per month just for the books. So you're already up to almost $2,000 in expenses. And actually, I didn't add in the electric or anything like that. So materials, I think I spent 800 to 1,000 a month on materials. So, you're going to have lots of recurring expenses. So when you add all those expenses, it adds up to about 24,000. So if we get 220 books out of each Gaylord, we make $220 per Gaylord. Let's say that's over about 3 months. And we multiply 220 times 120, you get about 26,400. So that means you profit roughly $2,400. It doesn't sound too good, right? But if we add in the pulp money, that is the recycle money, and let's say we recycle 70% of a Gaylord, which is a little high, but let's say that's what we're recycling, that's about $2,250. So now that brings your profit up to $4,650 per month. But the one thing we haven't added in here in expenses is transport of the books. So transport's not free. So if you're getting them in as full trailers, you gotta think that's going to cost at least $300 in transport fees, and that's if it's coming relatively locally. So that could be even more. So let's say we added another $900 for transport. So that brings your profit to like $3,750, right? So you can see how this is all very dependent on so many different things. So $3,750 per month is not terrible, but it's not that great for the headache that you're going to incur from doing all this. But you can make this a lot more profitable. So how can we get those numbers up? So there's a lot of different ways. You can get better sources. So at one time, I was getting 300 listings, as high as 400 listings off every Gaylord. Using 300 as an example, that's $36,000 we would make off of the books over 3 months. That means we pocketed, misspelled that we pocketed about $12,000 per month. That's not too bad. That sounds a lot better. Cheaper cost of goods. So if we paid only 3 cents per pound for the books, we'd only pay $810 per week. That saves us like over $2,000 per month. That brings our profit up to $6,810. That's a big difference. Higher sell-through rate. This is something that's going to be tweaked over time. It's definitely something that you want to always be looking at. If you sold 70% of the books that you listed, but you still got 220 books per Gaylord, and you kept the average selling price after all the expenses as far as shipping expenses at $2, that's a total of $308 you're making per Gaylord, bringing the monthly profit again back into the 12,000 range. So that's looking pretty good, but that's a lot easier said than done. Buying and selling more books. This is one of the easiest ways to make more money. If you bought 60 Gaylords per week instead of 30 Gaylords per week, it's going to increase your cost of goods by 2 times, but it's also going to increase the money you make. So the warehouse expenses are going to stay the same, and your labor cost goes up, but they don't go up the same amount. Your labor costs will probably only go up maybe 33%, something like that. So you're able to make more money. So this is usually the easiest way to make more money when you're talking about low margins. And then there's efficiency upgrades. If you have $30,000 in the bank, you can go get yourself a really good packing machine. So packing machines can save you a lot of money in the long run. Do you have $200,000 in the bank? Well, if you have that much money in the bank, you can get a self-sorting conveyor that does all the work of maybe 10 to 20 people. And they scan the books optically. You don't need barcodes. You don't need ISBNs. And anything is possible when you have enough money. So you can completely wipe out the use of having so many people pre-sorting books simply by having the right custom, and I emphasize custom, technology. But it's very expensive. And of course, lower rent. What if you didn't have to spend that $6,000, $7,000 a month on rent? That's why real megaseller operations buy their warehouse space. So they're paying $4 to $10 million for their warehouses, and sometimes even more than that. So if you still want to merchant fulfill books, and this sounds like something that's interesting to you, but you have to remember that this money is gained over a period of time. You have to remember, because it takes that time, you need reserve capital to cover the expenses and fees and all that stuff while that stuff is selling. So you always need more money in the bank than you need. Now, being in a warehouse as often as I was, it was kind of far from my house. It's not what I was looking to do. With that said, I do still love the book business. I still FBA books. I just sent in an FBA shipment of almost 1,100 books, and that was not even that long ago. But I love the book business still, and merchant fulfilling, it can be profitable, right? Given the right circumstances. In the wrong circumstances, it can be a money pit, and you can lose a lot of money. So I've made my own share of mistakes learning. I can show you through the things I've learned how to find out if doing merchant fulfill makes any sense for you to do without spending a ton of money up front on all the equipment and things like that. You can do all those calculations ahead of time, so it's predictable. So if you're interested in being a quote-unquote megaseller, you have 10, 20,000 startup capital, because if you don't have any real startup capital, you're going to have a hell of a time doing this. So if you have that much money, you're willing to work up to 60-hour weeks. You're willing to listen. You're willing to learn. You're easy to deal with, not strung out or too stressed out or anything like that, then you can contact me. My email is jim@jimpickens.com. I love to be a small percent partner of your merchant fulfilled op. I put in quote parentheses here, just don't ask me to come ship 400 books for you on a Sunday. You're on your own with that. And that was one of the things that, I really didn't like to do. And when people call out, different things happen. You have to do it. Those books have to go out no matter what. So this is more of a labor of love for me at this point. If it was something that I work with you on, I'm not looking to take any profits in the first 3-6 months or anything like that. It's going to take time to get going. And trust me, I understand that. So I want to do this because I want to do it. Certainly not because I need to do it. I'm definitely not looking for something to be another headache or strain on my life or anything like that. This would just be something kind of fun for me to do on the side. I do like to optimize. That's what I am proficient at, I would say, and I'd like to do. I don't like to do grunt work. That means I don't like to stand at a station and ship 500 books that I can just hire someone else to do. And it's very repetitive and it's very frustrating for me. So that's not what I'm looking to do. So if this is something that you want to help, there's certainly a lot more to this that I just don't have the time to go through in a video like this. There is so much to learn, so much to do. And the last thing I would want to see is anybody start or try to get into doing something like this and not have the full picture and not really understand what you really need to do something like this, because it's not something that you can just start like FBA books, which I'll get into in a second. So if you're looking for a simpler way to get into selling books, you can check out my Book Selling 101 course at bookselling101.com. The course goes over selling books on the FBA platform. So you don't need a warehouse, you don't need $10,000 to $20,000 of startup money, and you don't need shelving. Amazon will fulfill all the orders. It's way easier for a beginner. You can turn $1, $2 books, 50-cent books into $10 to $100 or more per book in profit. The margins are huge. It's difficult not to make money, which is the exact opposite of merchant fulfilling. It's a much more specialized field. It's a very secretive field. So that's another reason why I'm kind of making this video. I don't think this is really going to harm anyone in the merchant fulfill business. I don't think I've given away anything too crazy here. And the FBA course, I've sold this well over 1,000 copies. Tons of success stories. I would say every single week I'm getting 3 to 4 people sending me emails thanking me for all different kinds of reasons, but the bottom line is people are making money with it. So you can join the Book Selling 101 Lounge Facebook group if you want some more information on that. And if you are interested in the Merchant Fulfill partnering venture type of thing, email me, jim@jimpickens.com. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them here. And I will see you in the next video.